story about her before I move into my part of the presentation, because every time I think about it, I laugh out loud, and sometimes my wife thinks I'm crazy. Two things you have to remember. First of all, you know, Oprah Winfrey had all of these people who came and talked about their problems on her program, right? And the other thing, you know, on Sunday in the church they have what they call the mourner's bench, where you go and sit and confess all of your sins. Okay, now let me tell you the story. Dr. Ali and I are in the same professional association, the National Council of Teachers of English, which is the largest association of academics in the English discipline in the world, actually, and also the International Linguistics Association and a couple of others, because we both have studied language, which is linguistics, which is the science of language. Anyway, okay, we had a reception for Dr. Geneva Smithman about 3 or 4 years ago before she retired, because you heard Dr. Rashida say that she's retired now from Michigan State University, and she's now teaching in one of the universities in South Africa. Anyway, Geneva's a preacher's kid, right? So, and she grew up in Detroit. So Dr. Rashida, before she was Dr. Rashida, said that she was one day just tired and depressed because she was working on that dissertation. The dissertation is the book-length study that one has to present in order to get that doctorate. That master's degree and the PhD, the doctorate degrees are not easy. They're not like just finishing the number of courses and submitting an application and getting that bachelor's degree. Totally different ball game here. Anyway, Dr. Rashida said that one day she was in Dr. Geneva Smithman's office, and she was laying on her couch, and she was moaning and groaning and had her head on her head saying, oh, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be involved in this. I'm too old to be studying for this degree now. And that she was moaning about this and complaining. And she said when Dr. Geneva, whom we call Dr. G, when Dr. G came into the office and saw her, Dr. G said, look, I am not Oprah, and this is not Sunday, and you better get up and get to work. And Dr. Rashida said that was the end of it. She got up and started doing the work and finished that degree, which is what she should have done. And those are the reasons why we love Dr. Geneva Smithman. And she'll probably be here in in November at the 100th year anniversary of our professional association. I hope some of you will be able to meet her. But we have to thank Dr. Rashida Ali for her presentation today, because she taught us about all those elements of language. Remember when she talked about vocabulary, she was talking about the semantic system of language. And when she talked about, like when we pronounce, sometimes we will drop R on some of our words. She's talking about phonology, which is the sound system, and how we put words together, which is, we call it syntax or grammar. And she did that in a most wonderful way, because we have, as she said, a different language from the large American society, and it's because when we came in masses after even though we came in 1619 to this country, now they started taking our people out of Africa in 1555, as Elijah Muhammad taught us on the good ship Jesus. Remember that? But they started going to Europe before they started coming to various parts of Central and North and South America. But from 1619 to 1765, the literature says we came in dribs and drabs. 1765 was when the first slave ship came, where the ship of enslaved Africans came, where all of the cargo was Africans who were enslaved. And at that point, they started separating us, and we didn't have exposure to English as such, which was the main language in this country. So we used, as Dr. Rashida said, we used words and grammar structure from our various African languages and superimposed English words on them, and that's why we have this dialect. We know when we listen to people on the radio or hear them on the telephone, we can tell often what their skin color is, and it's because of the dialect of the language. You follow me? So it's a very real thing. Now, our beloved leading teacher, Brother Imam Mohammed, was very well aware of that. And you remember, brothers and sisters, he said to us, that Allah puts the ability for us to learn language, to have language, and use language in all of us. The Imam talked about the birth process, where life moves from first thick, watery substance, which is semen, to a blood-like clot, and from that after the clot forms, after about 3 months, it becomes a fetus, and the fetus grows into a baby, and it's birthed as a human being. The Imam said that at birth, the baby begins a new phase of development, And I want to take us back to one of his very first publications, 1976. Remember the lectures of Imam Mohammed? Okay, if you go back and look at some of those things, you realize what he has, sometimes we forget what he gave us. What he said in The Forces of Birth, which is the first chapter. Even though the baby is delivered from the womb, and it is called a human being or a fully developed life, it is not really a fully developed life. It has just been released from one part of the life growth process to begin a new phase of the development process, which is another process of struggle. So both of them are struggle. When we arrive as a person in the world, our new mind, and here mind is the optimum word, begins to be influenced by the things that are in the environment around us. As the mind grows and grows, it is doing the same thing that the physical life has done in the womb of the mother. Now, this new phase includes the development of the mind. The mind is the function of the brain. You know, when we go in and dissect the brain, there's no one specific area that people call the mind, even though they do talk about the most conscious part of the brain being the frontal lobes. So all of the information we take into the brain together operates together, and I think all of that is a part of our mind. Now, in order to get information into the brain, that brain goes in through our senses, through taste, and through smelling, and through seeing, and through hearing, etc. Now, all of this different information is carried to our environment, carried from our environment to the brain, and the brain organizes this information to help us develop our intelligence. Allah tells us in the Quran that He uses these senses and these senses, all of these senses together are culminated in our intelligence. And He says this about 5 or 6 times. I've recorded the times, but one place in the Quran is in the 16th surah, Surah Al-Nahl. He says, let me show you this one right here. It is He who brought you forth from the wombs of your mothers, when ye knew nothing, and He gave you hearing and sight. He gave you the senses. And intelligence. He gave you hearing and sight and intelligence and affection, that ye may give thanks to Allah. So He's telling us that He's the one who gave us all of these things. You take this instrument here, brothers and sisters, and it's in our eyes that takes that information to the brain and tells us this thing has this back to it, and it has this seat to it, and how it's shaped and what have you, and it's something that holds the body. The eyes take that information to the brain. The brain cannot see it. Do you follow me? Okay, the brain assimilates that information with other things that we get about it, other information we learn about this through our other senses, and then at some point a name is attached to it, word is attached to it, which we call cheer. And whenever we see other instruments that are like that we can rest the body on, we call them cheer, or some form of that. So all of these senses carry information to the brain, and all of that together with what happens in the brain is what we call intelligence. And we cannot identify it. Allah knows how it all happens, but we know different parts of the brain. I can't talk intelligently about that, but I know Dr. Hamid, who studied physiological psychology, knows about those different parts of the brain. But being fascinated with neuroscience, I've studied them. Okay?